Today marks International Day of Sport for Development and Peace. This day recognizes the role sport and physical activities play in communities. Now, this year's theme is Sport for the Promotion of Peaceful and Inclusive Societies. Joining me now to chat more about the importance of this day is IOC member Sam Ramsamy, as well as Olympic medalist Khotso Mokoena. Gentlemen, a pleasure to have you both on the program this afternoon. Sam, I'll start with you. As an IOC member, how would you perceive the role of the International Day of Sport for Development and Peace?
It started off 128 years ago because the 6th of April has been very significant for us. That was the opening of the first Olympic Games in Athens. And there it was decided that Olympic Games must be the target and focus of peace all over the world. And as far as that is concerned, we are continuing that particular process, and we have regular meetings regarding the peace program. And we have sessions at the Olympic Games, and also we have sessions at various international forums where we assemble athletes. For instance, Khotso will probably tell you about the last assembly of athletes that he went to and what was discussed there. But as far as peace is concerned, it is very, very important because peace goes along with another vicious thing that we're getting all over the world is called crime. So to a large extent, we also associate peace with crime. And we must make sure that athletes play a very important role. In fact, when I was president of the South African Olympic Committee, we had a program called Athletes Against Crime, and it was held, organized and led by a very prominent Olympian who is still involved in Hezekiel Sepeng. And I believe we can still do that in this country with all our athletes helping. And I'm proposing to our NOC that we must initiate this particular program because that will help us a lot. Peace means basically we all want to live comfortably. We all want to live happily. That is what peace means to most people in the ordinary sense of the word. If you talk about peace in wars and all that, many people don't understand that particular type of peace. Peace means get away from poverty, get away from crime, and live happily so that when you walk out of your houses, you don't have to fear anybody. That is what peace is all about. And the IOC is doing a tremendous amount of work in encouraging that particular phase for all athletes.
Now, Khotso, as mentioned in my intro, you are an Olympic medalist. Give us some of your personal anecdotes of how sport has really brought communities together or promoted peace.
Yeah, indeed, when you speak about sports being something that promotes peace, it does indeed. Sports brings about the collaboration of people for a common goal, which is to support something, right? And that is supporting something that is good for all. And I think that's why I also want to say that sports sponsorship should increase for this one particular reason, and that is sports bringing the economy of sports a little bit higher than what it is, especially before the games. It brings the community together for a common goal and all these other positive things that comes with it. So because of that, I'd like to also ask all the corporate spaces to consider coming to help these athletes, because athletes are also one purpose, and that is to bring the spirit together. That is why it's called the spirit of Olympism.
Mr. Ramsamy, South Africa is known as a sporting nation, but also a country with a number of challenges. I mean, high unemployment amongst them as well. But how do we then use sport to, promote the positive aspects of this country?
It is being used, but it's not being publicized. For instance, one of the Olympic channels in South Africa is doing quite a lot of activity in encouraging sport amongst all communities, and they are organizing sports, especially for young boys and girls. And that's very important. For instance, as we talk today, the South African Senior School Sports Association is having their championships in Cape Town. And these are activities we need to encourage and promote and use particular areas, especially in the schools. Sadly, I believe the schools are not playing a role at all, if I might say so. Some are playing a role, but most of them are not playing a role in encouraging sport, because by encouraging sport, that is what we can do. I've spoken to very many teachers, I've spoken to very many principals, and they say, yes, but we don't have facilities. I taught in England, in many schools in England. They do not all have facilities. They take them to a sports ground. I've been to Cuba. Many of the schools, they don't have facilities. They take them to the sports ground. Why can't we do that, the same thing? And we mustn't whinge and say, of course, there are lots of other issues. We understand the issue of playing fields, that they're not very easy. In the meanwhile, we should encourage athletes, the young boys and girls, to take part in sport, and that is the way we can get a community together. And I was in Cuba a few years ago, and I was very, very impressed. Many of those schools didn't have any sports facilities at all, but they all assembled, they were bussed together once a week or twice a week, and I used to do that when I was a school teacher in England. That is what I encourage all school teachers and principals to do here in this country.
Khotso, as we wrap up our conversation, and also you having taken part in the Olympics, you don't have to go far to see some of the problems plaguing the world right now. Just flick through your TV and see stories about the conflict or the war in Gaza, or even the invasion of Ukraine. So speak to us about how the Olympics, for instance, serve as a symbol of peace.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question to note, and thanks for asking that question. I mean, if you look at what the values of the Olympics stand for, especially with what is going on in today's world, look at all the athletes that are coming from different nations, different nations that are even in conflict with each other. But these athletes come together under one roof, which is the Olympic Games. That should tell something. That should speak something on its own. And I think it's a good example of how the earth should live together. How nations should collaborate together. They should follow the color of Olympus, and that is working together.
Khotso, let me thank you for your time. That's Khotso Mokoena, is an Olympic medalist. Also joining us for this conversation was Sam Ramsamy, who is an IOC committee member. We continue with this now. In June last year, Newzroom Afrika flighted the story of Sechaba Rakoloti, who was allegedly murdered by his husband in October of 2020. The husband had turned to the National Director of Public Prosecutions to have the matter thrown out of court due to a lack of evidence. This left the family devastated, but after a couple of court appearances following our broadcast, they say there's a glimmer of hope as the trial date has now been set for July. My colleague Linda Mnisi caught up with the family in Thokoza.
In June last year, we brought you this broadcast of the story of Sechaba Rakoloti, where his family felt like they were losing grip of the case because his husband had turned to the Director of Public Prosecutions to have the matter thrown out of court for lack of evidence. Essentially, what they told us at the time was that in October 2020, Sechaba was coming back from a funeral and a few hours later was found murdered in the boot of his car. Upon investigations, the police discovered that his husband was behind the murder. He was arrested and subsequently granted bail, but after further delays, which they said were due to investigations, it seemed as though critical statements had gone missing, and that those statements were the ones that would really get them the justice that they sought. And upon learning that those critical statements were missing, and upon further delays, it is then that the husband wanted the matter thrown out by, of course, going to the Director of Public Prosecutions. But it seems that wasn't successful. That application to have that matter struck off was not successful, and that is why we're here today. I'm sitting with Sechaba's sister, Phindiswa Rakoloti. She'll give us a sense of this particular case and will give us a sense of where they are right now as a family. Pindisa, I want to thank you so much for your time. The last time we spoke to you, you were very distraught, especially because Chaba was your brother. You were quite close to him, his contributions in the community. Talk to us about, remind us in fact about how Chaba passed away.
Okay, in 2020 when he was coming back from the funeral in Northwest, we found call later on that day that he was murdered. The husband called us telling us that my brother was deceased. He was murdered and put in the boot. So we followed up the case, the police came, they arrested the guy, and then the case has been postponed. It was dragging, and we tried to follow up to get the sense of what's going on, what's the matter, but we didn't get any positive feedback as the IO was not communicating with us, the prosecutor was not communicating with us. We didn't get any communication from anyone regarding the case. So we've been trying to go everywhere to get assistance, but we have been failing so far. So since the postponement of the case, we've tried to engage with the IO. However, he was kind of dodgy, and we found out that the evidence, most of the evidence was missing from the docket. So we tried to follow up on that also, but we failed up until last year when we got the engagement from the Newzroom Afrika, and then from there we got a positive feedback, and the evidence it's now in the docket.
All right, thank you so much for your time. That's Pindiswa Rakoloti, who is the sister, and I'm sure you can see just behind her other family members who have been calling for justice. These are members that have been concerned about the case and how long it was dragging. You'll remember even in your introduction you did mention that he passed away in October 2020, and last year it seemed as though the case was going cold and it was never going to see the light of day in a court of law. But now they say that they're quite pleased with the recent developments, having been given a trial date, which is in July, the 10th of July, as you heard there. So the matter will be going on trial, and the accused person will have his time in court and will get to answer to the allegations.
Still to come on Newsfeed PM, Andy will bring you all the latest in the world of sports. Do stay with us.
Checking. Can't hear anything.
Angie, are you on the right position?